have a career that allows you to work locally, regionally, and internationally, right? In terms of the standards that we have here and we have regionally, how does it compare? What are some of the good things that you've seen work in terms of when a crisis does happen, how you manage it, or how do you prevent it on a whole? Because sometimes, you know, when we're just stuck in our own bubble, we don't know what's the standard out there as much. We may think we know, but if we don't have that sort of experience and exposure out there, do we really know how to sort of think? So what are some of those standards and how can they compare to how we do things here? What are some of the good things you've seen abroad?
So let me start off by saying that our situations and issues are not unique. I had the opportunity, could be a month now, yeah, could be about a month now, to go to Italy for a cultural and creative industry foresight forum. And there were about 20 countries represented in the room. And they were, of course, trying to get what of the creative and cultural challenges in everybody's, you know, different region or country or state or whatever. And it perpetuates the same messaging that we all have the same issues, just at different levels, right? So there's that in that nutshell. But one of the things that I do think we need to work on desperately is moving away from this cultural fear that we have for contracts and understanding the contracts. And you know, it's yes, it's a bunch of, you know, legal jargon sometimes that might just fly straight over your head, but you know, it is important. And this scenario definitely shows that it is important for people to understand the contracts and to have qualified people draft it. So a lot of the artists and cultural organizations that I work with locally, everybody tends to just run online, download a contract, and say, you know, change up some things in it and say, yes, this is what it is. But they don't understand necessarily what they're doing. And I will say very cautiously that that may work for something small, um, something that costs small amount of money. And I know small is relative. Um, but it's not going to work for major events, for major contracts. And it is a practice that we kind of need to get away from. Um, yeah, so I think this aversion to contracts that we've had for umpteen years and still going on, it needs to we need to move away from that.
Well,
Uh,
one of the things that touches on that I wonder to what extent the aversion to contracts could be also part of another problem if it exists. I don't know that it does. An aversion to kind of moving beyond the kind of amateur background that a lot of our performing community started off with maybe a decade ago. Like, it's very different now. Even the amateur choirs are very different now because of the level of skill, formally educated practitioners in the business side and the performance side, especially performance side. So things are changing. But I feel as though the roots of anything outside of soca, even calypso to some extent, and kaiso and the like, the roots of our performance industries are word of mouth, who you know, but not who you know like Hollywood, who you know like really is your friend, and we kind of do an amateur hour thing, and if it, you know, and it's very, like you say, small scale, and part of it is that lack of desire to really get professional, which is fine if you stay small scale, but when you go to, you know, $900,000 or however much, if it was US or whatever it was in US, right? It's like, you can't just do things on a handshake and a bear over bears. Like, that's not a thing anymore. But I feel as though we don't have the practice, like, we are being formally educated a lot on the performance side of it and the art, but the business side of it, a lot of the people who get involved in the industry, sound engineers, managers, and the like, promoters, they're self-taught. So to say that professional standards are going to just interject themselves, especially when we want to bring international people in, it's not so simple, right? Am I correct in that? Some of it, most of it, none of it?
No, yes, certainly. But I do feel I will counter that and say there are a lot of educational platforms and resources now for the past, I would say about 10, 12 years, regarding business side of the creative industries. There are a lot of YouTube, what you call it? YouTube
Resources.
learnings on there, videos that they can check out. You had a whole department for creative TT for music, film, and fashion. And we have endless business resources, and videos and workshops and conferences and all of these things to make sure that we're empowering these artists to be able to be business forward and to set up in a way that they are able to succeed, right?
But I feel like the
What
artists might do it, but the promoters, the investors, they're like, well, I have money and I know what I'm doing because I've always done it this way. And that's something you see a lot from older generations in many industries, but in performing arts as well. But it's almost like if we haven't caught up with a new generation of promoters to kind of understand, oh, well, we don't have to do it that way. Why do you think we have to do it that way? Because as you pointed out, if we really want to scale this thing up, there are limitations to doing it, without all the professional checks and balances.
And that in itself is an issue that you pointed out, because the mere fact that you're saying that this was for artists, that is a challenge that we're having, because we put out this information, we do these sessions, and I realize over the past few years that if we don't specifically itemize in the advertisement who this is the intended audience, people automatically think it's just for the artists. So even on the artists, we literally have to say steel panists, instrumentalists in general. If we don't specify, they don't think it's for them, even if we say it's the music industry business and business related courses. So that is something I do want to point out there, because I know even the intellectual property office here, TTIPO, they would have trainer programs, they would have training programs on copyright and intellectual property and so forth, which are all things that the promoters should gravitate towards to make sure that they, understand certain things. They would go through contracts and clauses and all these different things, but they are not the persons in the room. They, being the promoters, are not the persons. They're never in the room.
Well,
They're never in the room.
a quick follow-up. Professional music. Do we kind of have a psychological blind spot where if it's not dancehall, Trinidad, soca, or reggae, it's in the region, it's not really going to be professional music? Because it seems like commercially those are the things that are in the region. Outside of that, we don't seem to identify them as professional. We don't seem to identify the person playing the pan at a dinner service as professional. Technically, that is professional.
I don't think so, but I get where you're coming from with the instrumentalist side. The genre side of things, I don't think so. But the instrumentalist, I think it's more of where our education system has kind of pushed. So when you think of music, especially professional musicians, it's always a case of, because of our systems pushing them towards education, right? So most of our trained musicians end up being music educators, because that's how our educational system is set up, where music professionals are concerned, instrumentalists more so, right? And aside from that, you have the gig culture, which is fine, and that gig economy has its place, right? Not everybody is gonna aim to be Etienne Charles on a gigantic stage selling out, arenas, right? So, but I think it's more to get them again towards the business side of things. I remember when I left the music program at UE, and really started on my path towards arts administration. There was some visual arts students that I was speaking to at an global entrepreneurship week that UE was having. And they were saying that, in the arts programs in UE, they teach them to be artists, to create, to, hone in on those very intricate skills, but nobody teaches them how to sell their art.
Okay.
So you have these great artists coming out, but then the business side of it is completely lacking because they're not being given those tools at that very, important level to be able to be the entrepreneurs that all creators naturally are.
Right. Yes.
So I think that is a very important element that is lacking within, I would say, the university education
Right.
sphere.